people who are as informed as anyone on the topics we care about, and B, just be good citizens. So we'll fund people who are working for the things we care about, but we're not going to do or really fund things that involve, deceiving people, lying, breaking the rules, using coercion. That's us kind of saying we're going to advocate for what we want. We're going to try and do it fairly. We're going to try and do it honorably, and we're going to try and be as knowledgeable as anyone else doing it. And that's pretty much what we can try to do. On incarceration specifically, you do rightly point out that maybe if we succeed in reducing the amount of incarceration in this country, maybe that's bad. Maybe that has a public safety cost. And I can't promise you that that's not the case. But we did, David Rudman, who is our senior advisor, who has done a lot of research projects for us, he spent like a year going through the literature on the relationship between incarceration and crime, has a paper coming out on this soon that I think is really excellent. I would basically recommend everyone read it, especially if you like anyone who picks apart science, takes studies, picks them apart, exposes their flaws. And I think David is the best person I've seen anywhere really at going into a large, confusing academic literature, sorting out the good studies from the bad, then taking the good studies, scrutinizing them really hard. I think studies have like a 50% mortality rate when David looks at them. And then, putting it all together, making it understandable, and telling you, what the most sober, even-handed, critical assessment would say. And so that is, that's the kind of thing we try to throw at problems that are confusing us, where there's a literature to look at, and that's the general attitude we try to bring. And David's conclusion at the moment is that, on the current margin, so where we are now in the U.S., further incarceration, his best guess is that would have zero benefit to reducing crime. So the positive aspects would be canceled out by the negative aspects because there are ways in which putting more people in prison can create more crime. And so that's his best guess, and he has a whole lot more analysis in that paper that's coming out soon. Yeah, Tyler.
Can you give an update on the science areas?
Yeah, update on the science areas. So for a long time, I would just show up at these things and be like, we haven't really figured out how to start doing science yet. So finally, I have some news. So we have a couple of senior science advisors. One of them, has just stepped down as professor at Berkeley. And what our basic approach has been, broadly speaking, in science, is we did a lot of things, we did a lot of experiments to try and find cool science stuff, and I could go through them all, but I won't. And where we kind of landed was we landed on saying, look, the science we'd most like to do is science that directly relates to other focused areas that we've already chosen, to the things I've talked about before. So science that could help prevent the next horrible pandemic, science that could help, create replacements for meat that would lead to less animal suffering. Things like that are our top priority. And then after that, what we kind of believe is that our advisors are able to look at an area and sometimes just see something ridiculously good. And if they do, and it's an area that we think is pretty good, then we'll do it. And if they don't, they'll just move on and look at another area. So it's very opportunistic. It's not so much cause-based. It's more like we look in a lot of corners of science and we just look for great studies or approaches that fell through the cracks. So examples of things we've done. So one thing we did in this spirit, the National Institutes of Health, the big government funder that spends tens of billions of dollars a year on medical research, they have a transformative research award program. So they ask people to submit things that are too ambitious, too big, too risky for the normal funding mechanisms, and then they fund the best ones. But they don't fund many of them. I think they fund probably something in the $10 million a year range of this stuff, out of tens of billions of dollars in their budget. And so we basically got their reject pile. We got all the things they hadn't funded. And we basically invited everyone who had been rejected to apply to us and just send us the same application and send us their reviewers' comments if they had them, and we went through them. And so, we found definitely some interesting stuff there, such as, someone who is trying to build a nanopore sequencer for proteins. So basically, if you put a protein into this machine, you should be able to cheaply and quickly find out what the protein is. That could have a lot of applications. So we're funding a number of those. That's an example of how we explored for things that are really outstanding. And then, other things we found while kind of poking around in areas we're excited about. We are working on a potential broad-spectrum antiviral drug that would, might not work out, and even if it did, wouldn't be useful for mild viruses because it would have side effects, but could be like really useful in a very bad pandemic situation. Another thing that we've done is an investment in Impossible Foods, which is our best guess at the most promising thing for replacing meat with other products. So, the Impossible Burger is a burger made out of genetically engineered plants, in a sense, or it involves genetically engineering plants to produce a certain protein, which they then put into the burger. As someone who likes burgers, I have found it the most impressive veggie burger. So you can, take that for what it's worth. Though we're investing, so disclosure. We've also recently announced a major grant, like something in the $20 million range, for gene drives, which is a technology for genetically modifying mosquitoes in a way that they transmit the modification to their offspring highly reliably. So if you can get one mosquito to be malaria resistant, they can't carry the malaria parasite, and to transmit that quality to their offspring, and those offspring to transmit it to their offspring,